Sean Diddy Combs was found guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution in July 2025, but acquitted of more serious charges like racketeering and sex trafficking. In October 2025, he was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months in prison, $500,000 fine, and 5 years of supervised release for these convictions related to his conduct with his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura and another victim, facing a total of 50 months behind bars. Combs is currently incarcerated at a federal prison in New Jersey, as scheduled for release in May 2028. As much as it's strange to see a rich and famous person behind bars, usually the more money you have, the less likely you are to get a conviction. Sean Combs escaped a much harsher punishment by being acquitted for racketeering and sex trafficking charges. For decades, Sean Combs was a force of nature in music, fashion, and business. From the success of Bad Boy Records in the 90s to his media empire, Combs built an enterprise worth nearly $1 billion. He was a definition of self-made man who shaped an era of culture. But as it surfaced in the past few months, also thanks to a controversial Netflix documentary produced by 50 Cent, a lot of resentment and secrets were going on behind the scene. There is a lot of information online about the trial and Sean Combs' life. If you want to do a deep dive, I recommend you watch the documentary, even though, as many people say, it's quite biased. But in this video, we're going to look at the trial, stating the facts of the trial kind of briefly, and then we will focus on the racketeering charges. Sean Combs' empire began to visibly crack in November 2023 when Combs' former girlfriend, R&B singer Cassie Ventura, filed a lawsuit alleging a decade of rape, sex trafficking, and brutal physical abuse. The lawsuit was settled just 1 day after it was filed, but the Pandora box was open. More accusers came forward, and the allegations were too numerous and severe for law enforcement to ignore. The wave of civil suits kicked off a federal investigation, which led to raids by Homeland Security on Combs' mansion in Los Angeles and Miami in March 2024. In September of the same year, Sean Combs was arrested by federal agents in Manhattan after a grand jury returned an indictment. It was charged with 5 felony counts: racketeering, conspiracy, 2 counts of trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, and 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs pleaded not guilty to everything but was denied bail, marking the start of his stay at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. The trial started in May 2025 before Judge Arun Subramanian, and prosecutor laid out the central argument. Sean Combs was the leader of a criminal enterprise. They argued that the Combs enterprise was used to enable and cover up an horrifying pattern of abuse. Prosecutors painted a picture of a world where Combs used his immense power to violently coerce women into sexual acts. The most disturbing element of the case are the now infamous freak-off. These were described as days-long drug-fueled orgies, often involving multiple partners and hired sex workers. The government alleged that Combs and his employees would procure drugs, hire escorts, and book travels to stage these events across state lines. To build the case, the prosecution called multiple witnesses, including the star witness Cassie Ventura. Over 4 days on the stand, she gave a graphic testimony describing a relationship where she said was defined by control and violence. She recounted alleged beatings, including an infamous 2016 incident where Combs assaulted her in an hotel hallway, which was captured on a CCTV camera. She testified that her job began participating in the freak-offs, which she said could last upon 72 hours. She told the jury she felt disgusted and humiliated, but she was too scared of Combs to say no. Another key witness, identified as Jane, backed up Ventura's claims. She testified that she was pressured into sexual intercourse with other men and felt she had to comply because Combs paid her rent and threatened to release explicit videos of her. The prosecution called former employees to the stand, trying to prove the abuse was enabled by the Combs enterprise. This is a very important aspect of racketeering charges, so keep that in mind for the rest of the video. A former assistant testified under an immunity deal that he was tasked with procuring drugs for the freaks off. A hotel security guard testified he was offered $100,000 for the surveillance footage of the 2016 assault on Ventura's, a payment prosecutors called a bribe. The defense did what the defense usually does and say that this was not criminal but part of a consensual swingers lifestyle. They argued that witnesses like Cassie Ventura were motivated by money, highlighting the multi-million-dollar settlement she received, and tried to reframe the narrative as one of unconventional relationship, not criminal conspiracy. But the charge that everybody was waiting for was the racketeering conspiracy, better known as RICO. This is a law designed to take down organized crime syndicates. To get a RICO conviction, prosecutors had to prove that Combs was the head of an enterprise, his business and staff, and that he directed them to commit at least 2 underlying crimes like bribery and sex trafficking within 10 years. A RICO conviction could have meant life in prison. It was the charge that tied everything together, and the jury decision on the single count would determine if Combs would spend the rest of his life behind bars. After 7 weeks of testimony, the case went to jury on June 2025. After a full day, the jury sent a note. They had a verdict on all counts except the RICO charge. They were deadlocked. The judge instructed them to keep trying, and finally, on the 2nd of July, after 3 days, the jury of 8 men and 4 women delivered a mixed verdict. Not guilty. Sean Combs was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy. He was also acquitted of both counts of sex trafficking by force. However, the jury found Combs guilty on 2 counts of violating the Mann Act, a federal law that bans transporting people across state lines for prostitution. These convictions were tied to the transportation of Cassie Ventura and the other witness, Jane, for the freaks off, which the jury decided was illegal activity. But the question is, what makes the RICO charges so complex to assess, and why it made it so difficult for the jury and took them so much time to reach a decision, and eventually they decided that they had no sufficient proof.
Because of RICO.
Is he your brother?
No, the RICO statutes.
Oh, of course, right.
The Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations RICO Act is a United States federal law enacted in 1970 by Title IX of the Organized Crime Control Act. The law extends criminal and civil responsibilities for acts performed as part of an ongoing criminal organization. Before the RICO Act, law enforcement struggled to prosecute organized crime syndicates because this organization involved layers of individuals who were not directly participating in the commission of legal acts. If you think, for example, at a mafia group, there is at the top, at the mafia group, there is a mafia boss, and at the dam, there will be the leader of a chapter, then there is the leader of a subgroup, and then there are the soldiers that commit the act. You can find the person that commit the act, you can put them in prison, but you might not be able to connect them to the mafia boss that remain clean, and you don't have a lot to prosecute them and to put them away to bring them to justice. For example, before the RICO Act, it was very difficult to convict Italian American mafia bosses like Al Capone. I talk more about this problem in a video specific to Al Capone, which I link here and in the description. At the end, he was convicted for tax evasion, which was the only thing that he could personally be linked to. This problem would have not have occurred under the RICO Act. Under RICO, generally, it's unlawful to use or invest income derived from a pattern of racketeering to acquire an interest in an enterprise, acquire or maintain an interest in an enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, conduct or participate in the affair of an enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, or conspire to violate any of the foregoing provision. In other words, a RICO case is twofold. First, a person must engage in a pattern of racketeering activity, which generally means committing at least 2 criminal acts from a list of specific offenses like bribery, fraud, money laundering within a period of 10 years. Second, the person must be part of a group that is engaged in illegal activity, for example, a criminal gang or the mafia. In the case of Sean Combs, the people he was doing business with would have represented his criminal group. In Combs' case, the RICO charges failed because the prosecution failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he ran a structured, organized criminal enterprise. The sentence of 4 years and 2 months brings the federal criminal case to a close, but the story isn't finished. Combs' defense team says they plan to appeal, and Combs still faces over 70 civil lawsuits from other accusers, guaranteeing that the legal battle for Combs will continue for years to come. The failure of the RICO charge against Sean Combs ultimately comes down to how narrow and demanding the law really is. RICO is not designed to punish powerful individuals for repeated bad acts and multiple crimes over time. It's designed to dismantle organizations that exist, at least in part, to commit crimes, which doesn't mean they exist solely to commit crimes. They can also do other things, for example, a legitimate enterprise, but part of what they do is also committing crime. In this case, the jury was not persuaded that Combs' enterprise functioned as a true criminal organization. Prosecutors did present evidence of horrific conduct that was facilitated by Combs' employee, but they struggled to prove the critical RICO elements: a clearly structured enterprise, a shared criminal purpose, and a sustained pattern of racketeering activity directed through the enterprise. To the jury, what they saw looked more like a powerful individual abusing his wealth and influence than a coordinated criminal syndicate operating with defined roles and continuity. I don't usually tend to agree or disagree with an adjudication. If this is what was decided, I trust that the judicial process was followed correctly and that the decision was legitimate. That might be appeal. We will see what happened. But I'm happy to hear from you what you think about the RICO charges and the case. So please leave me a comment below if you have any opinion about that. My name is Julia. I'm a certified anti-money laundering specialist. Here on YouTube, I talk about money laundering, organized crimes, financial crimes, all of this fun stuff. If you're interested in this topic, please comment, like, subscribe. All of these things really help the channel. Also, give me a follow on LinkedIn where I talk more about this topic on more of a professional setting. And this is all for me now, and I'll see you on the next one.